Okay, we're ready to go. So we'll call the meeting to order. Before we accept the agenda, if we could just do a roll call so everybody, we know exactly who's all on the line. And we'll just, I've got a picture of most of you, I think, on my iPad in front of me. So Merrill Harris is here. I see Dave Harrison. Gives me the thumbs up.
I'm here, yep.
Alan's here.
Yep.
Ginger.
Yep.
Brian Badura. I see Jennifer Croson. Craig Whitmer.
Aye.
Cord Reynolds.
Yep.
Steve Wickrink.
Good morning.
And it looks like we have Derek Taylor's in the room, Arlos is in the room, Candace is in the room, and Craig Pittman, are you on the line?
I am, yeah. Good morning.
Okay, is there anybody else on the call at all, or on the meeting? Yeah, can you turn, sorry about that. I think it's down on this side here. They're just working on my iPad for a minute. That sounds like everybody's here, so we'll, anybody want to give a motion to accept the agenda or any changes or any additions to the agenda of anybody?
I'll move it.
Okay, so moved by Alan. All in favor? Those that can vote? If you, let's just go down the list, I guess, for each motion. Dave, you in favor?
I am.
Steve?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Carried. Thank you. Adoption of our minutes of January 31st, 2020. Any corrections or amendments?
I'll move the minutes, Merrill.
Okay. We'll do the same thing for that. Dave in favor?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Merrill's in favor. Carried. Okay, we have a list of accounts of payments in front of us. Is there any questions about any of the things that are on that list that anybody would like an explanation? Anything out from either Brian Badura or Ginger that you want to tell us about here? Nothing sticks out to anybody? If not, then we will accept a motion for the 2 check runs.
I can make that motion, Merrill.
Okay, Jennifer gives a motion to approve. All in favor? Dave?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Gordon? Craig?
Yes. Yes.
Carried. Thank you. That's that. Thanks. All right. Balance sheet comparison. Brian Badura.
Yes, so I'll just go through it really quickly. As of March 31st, 2020, in the bank account, there was just over $586,000, just trade accounts receivable of $71,048, and chemical inventory $28,240, and prepaid insurance of $14,251. There was no change in the capital assets from the beginning of the year. So that leaves with total assets of $8,929,943. For liabilities, trade accounts payable of $196,342, accrued interest on the debenture of $12,852, and GST payable, which is actually a refund. It's a negative. That's why it's a negative $7,013. On the next page, the long-term liabilities, Alberta Capital Finance, $1,242,070. And you noticed in the checklist there that in March, I believe it was March 16th, there was a debenture payment made to Alberta Capital Finance. and that's the balance sheet.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Brian on the balance sheet comparison between March 2020 and 2019? If not, we need a motion to approve or accept.
I'll move that, Merrill.
Okay, is that Steve?
Craig.
Oh, Craig, okay, thanks, Craig. All right, all in favor? Dave?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Carried. Thank you, everybody. Merrill accepts also. All right, we'll do profit and loss comparison March 2020 to 2019. Brian?
Yes, so for January to March 2020 compared to 2019, our revenue's up a little bit at 183,656, and as far as the expenditures go, there's nothing really jumping out to point out to anybody, but it left us with a surplus at the end of March of $20,639.
Okay, any questions for Brian on that? My only thing that stands out to me was it's a big jump in revenues or water use, water sales, whatever. Is there any particular reason that sticks out so much versus last year? How, Ginger or Brian?
The reason why is we switched we increased the prices a little bit, but not that much. However, we switched our pricing model to include a fixed component as well as the variable component. So what that does is it should level off the monthly charge to the member municipalities. However, during the first 3 months when water usage was low, like for 2019, we were billing so much per cube. This year we're billing a fixed amount as well as a lower variable amount, and that means more was paid up front for these 3 months.
Okay, yeah, I remember changing the model. Now that you mentioned that, I do remember that. Anybody else have any questions regarding the profit and loss comparison? Okay, hearing none, we'd need a motion to accept that information.
I'll move that. Dave.
Okay, thanks, Dave. All those in favor, Steve?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Marilyn's in favor. Carried. Thank you. All right, we have Derek Taylor here from KPMG, who's going to present the audited financial statement for the year ending December 31st, 2019. So we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you guys today to go over the audit and the financial statements. For those of you who have had to listen to me talk about audited statements before, I apologize. But whenever an auditor meets with those charged with governance, we're required to go over certain items as part of our standards. So I will take us through those, and then I'll take us into the financial statements. To start off, just whenever an auditor does meet with boards, we're required to just reaffirm our independence. So we take steps to ensure KPMG, myself, and everybody that worked on the audit is independent of any decision makers and ensures that we don't have any financial dealings with the commission that would impede our independence in expressing our opinion and carrying out the audit. With regards to the audit, we are finished our audit work and are prepared to issue an unmodified or clean audit opinion subject to our discussion here today. Couple things that we're required to talk about would be the framework. So looking at the framework that the financial statements are prepared in accordance with. They're prepared in accordance with Canadian Public Sector Accounting Standards. So that's consistent with the framework that you've seen in the past. So when you look at your financial statements, they're very consistent with what you've seen. There hasn't really been any changes in that framework except for one new standard that came in this year, and that's with regards to restructured transactions. Now, the Commission didn't enter into any of those, so there was no impact on your financial statements. When we get into the financial statements, you'll notice, though, there is a note that talks about future accounting pronouncements. And so essentially what those notes do is just talk about the fact that the standards are evolving and changing over time. And while it's unlikely that any of those standards will have a significant impact on the Commission, it's required that it be disclosed in there so that users understand that the standards can change. Within the standards, management has certain policies that they use in their financial reporting. So another item that we're required to talk about would be whether or not we felt those policies were appropriate and whether or not there was any significant bias in them or any concerns from that perspective. There isn't any concerns that we need to bring to your attention. The next item that we're required to talk about would be where management has to use significant estimates in preparing the financial statements. So in preparing any financial statements within any of the frameworks used in Canada, management's required to make certain estimates. And so when we look at your financial statements, the primary estimate that's really there is the estimated useful life of your tangible capital assets. So when you purchase an asset that's going to last for multiple years, management's required to capitalize it or set it up as a long-term asset on your statement of financial position, and then they estimate the consumption or the estimated useful life of that asset, and it's brought into your statement of operations as an expense over that estimated useful life. As auditors, we're required to look at those estimates, look at the underlying assumptions, look at your historical experience, and look at your peer groups, and just assess again whether or not we had any concerns or whether there's any bias or any of those types of items. We don't have any of those concerns, but again, as I'd mentioned, just one of those items that we were required to talk to you about. The last few items before I take us into the financial statements is that during the course of our audit, there were no unadjusted or adjusted audit differences. So what this means is that your management team prepared a clean set of financial statements, if you will, throughout, and provided us with a set of financial statements that had no differences or no items that we noted during our audit. And then last would be if we had any other concerns that we wanted to bring to your attention, I'd bring those to your attention now. There aren't any. So that's kind of a quick sprint through those items. And if there's not any questions, I will take us into the financial statements, but I'll pause just since I don't see anything on my screen, so I'm not sure if there's any questions or concerns.
I don't see anything here, but does anybody have any questions at all on what Derek has talked about so far? Okay, hearing none, go ahead, Derek.
Wonderful, thank you. So taking us into the financial statements.
Just a sec. Can everybody hear Derek good?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I'll get a little bit
Yeah.
closer. My wife says I mumble too, so that might be the case. So just, I guess, the first item I'll draw everybody's attention to is the independent auditor's report. As I'd mentioned before, it's consistent with what you would have seen in the prior year in that it is an unmodified or a clean audit opinion. So it's very consistent with what you would have seen. I will take us to the statement of financial positions. That is page 4 in the statements. And this is essentially a snapshot of where the Commission was at December 31st. So just I'll talk about some of the variances or things that jump off the page when I look at the statements. I guess the first item would be our cash position. We do see that it's higher this year compared to the prior year. There's a couple things that will drive that, and we'll go through the statement of cash flow in a few moments. But the main thing here is that even though we have a deficiency of revenues over expenses or a loss on our statement of operations, when we factor in our non-cash transactions like amortization, which I talked about earlier being that estimated use or expensing or consumption of our capital assets, we'll see that actually we were in a positive cash flow, or if you were to add that back, even our statement of operations would be positive once you add back that amortization. So once we factor that in and then decreases in our liabilities and those types of items, we see that strengthening in our cash position. Moving down to our trade and other receivables, as well as amounts due from our Commission members, we do see that's down from the prior year. So again, a lot of times that fluctuation in our receivables is just a matter of timing as to when we receive payments from customers and from the commission members. So nothing alarming there, just a matter of when we receive those amounts. Moving down to our liabilities, we see that our accounts payable and accrued liabilities decreased, going from a little over 76,000 last year to a little over 25,000 this year. Largely last year, we just had a couple of large payables just at year end due to some of the activities that were occurring. I think we had one large payable for around $45,000 last year that we didn't have this year. So just one invoice in particular can cause a kind of a change in that balance there. Due to commission members, consistent with the prior year, there was no repayments of those amounts, and that's to be expected. And then our long-term debt, we do see a decrease there, and that's just our regular scheduled payments on the loan there. When we take our financial assets less our financial liabilities, we come down to the subtotal. It's about 2/3 down the page, which is our net debt line. We see that we have an improvement in our net debt position this year. Of course, we find ourselves in a net debt position because we have a long-term debt associated with capital assets. So while we are in a net debt position, it doesn't necessarily mean there's a liquidity issue. What it really means is that the commission has earmarked future revenue streams to pay off the decision to borrow money to reinvest in new tangible capital assets. We would expect that number to continue to decrease as the long-term debt is paid off. Moving down to our non-financial assets, the largest number on the page obviously is our tangible capital assets. So this is our infrastructure, all of our hard assets that of course we use in providing our water services. We see a decrease this year over the prior year, and that's because of the amortization that I was talking about earlier. The final two kind of numbers on within that non-financial assets area is just our inventory for consumptions and our prepaid expenses. We do see a slight increase in inventory for consumption. A lot of that is just the timing of when we've acquired, certain inventories that we're going to be using in the near future. So overall, when we look at our accumulated surplus, which represents our residual ownership in our assets less our liabilities, we do see that we decreased from the prior year. So going from 7.6 last year to 7.4 this year. And of course, that's going to really be driven by our statement of operations, which I'll speak to next. But we do see from an accounting purpose that we do have a deficiency of revenues over expenditures. And again, that's largely driven by that amortization number that I talked about earlier. The next page is our statement of operations. And so what this page does is it tells the story of what occurred financially throughout the year for the commission. So our first number that we look at is our water sales to commission members. We do see a bit of a decrease this year. A lot of times that's just being driven by consumption. It's a very modest decrease. Then we have some other revenues this year that we didn't necessarily have in the prior year related to some grant funding. Looking down at our expenses, overall we did see our expenses decrease. We do expect that to decrease a little bit when we do see our consumption levels drop a little bit, largely around our contracted and general services and our materials. So again, that has to do with just our operations and maintenance and those types of items going down. Of course, purchases from other government services is consistent with what we budgeted for. And then the second largest expense being that amortization of capital assets that I spoke of earlier. That number largely stays consistent as we're bringing in those assets over that estimated useful life. Overall, we see our shortfall of revenues over expenditures at 158,000, just about 159,000 this year, compared to just under 186,000 last year. Because of the amortization expense that I spoke of earlier, being at 307, we have that large non-cash expense. So if we were to add that back in there, we'd see that we'd actually have a positive cash flow from operations, which I'll speak to in a few moments. But as our amortization is expected to kind of outstrip or as we're going along drive us into that deficiency, we'd expect to see our accumulated surplus continue to kind of drop as our net book value and our capital assets decrease. Moving on to the next page, we have our changes in net debt. I spoke of the net debt position a few moments ago. Again, we saw it decrease or improve, if you will, from a negative 948 to a negative 807 this year. Again, that's because if we look up above and we see our shortfall and then we adjust it for our non-cash amortization, plus minus changes in our inventory, we see that our decrease in our net debt position, or that strengthening of 141,000, which is the, I guess, the third last number from the bottom. Look, compare the 141 this year to 114,000 last year. We see that improvement as our operations kind of actually generated less of a shortfall this year. And again, of course, when we add back that amortization, we see that improvement in our financial assets. The next page is our statement of cash flows. And what this page does is it takes your shortfall of revenues over expenditures and adjusts it for non-cash items. And I've already touched base on some of those to kind of drive what was the change in our bank account at the end of the day. So if we look at the first subtotal, which is just about 106,000 this year and 152,000 last year, what this number represents is the positive cash flow that the commission's operations generated. So the day-to-day operations generated a positive cash flow of about $106,000. So even though we had that shortfall, when we factor in the amortization and the changes in our receivables and payables, we had a net increase from day-to-day operations of $105,000. You always want to kind of see that number positive, because what that means is the day-to-day operations are giving you that positive cash flow to be able to pay off your long-term debt, as well as to maintain your assets and potentially reinvest in yourself in the future. So we've seen that positive cash flow from operations over the last number of years. So that's very, very positive thing for the commission. Outside of that 105, when we go a little bit lower, of course, we do have the regular scheduled repayment of the debt. So we do see an extra $54,000, not extra, but $54,000 going out of the bank account to pay for the principal portion of the debt, as that is not an expense. It's just a return on or paying back that debt. Overall, we see our cash flow increased by $51,000 this year to compared to just under $100,000 last year. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we had that large payable last year that we paid off. And I spoke about that earlier when I was on the statement of financial position. Overall, though, we did see our cash position improve, and that's just reflected in those statements. Starting on page 8, we get into, we have Schedule 1 of the financial statements. And so this is just a bit of a breakdown as to what's in your tangible capital assets, or those long-lived assets that I spoke about earlier. So of course, we've got it broken down between our land, our buildings, and our engineering structures. And then this schedule also goes through the amount of amortization that's been taken in the current year and over the lives of the assets so far. Starting on page 9, we get into the notes of the financial statements. The first page, I should say, goes through the significant accounting policies of the commission. So very consistent with what you would have seen in the prior years. Page 2 talks about future accounting pronouncements. So I spoke about this earlier in that the framework is constantly evolving. So this page just touches on the future changes that will be occurring, and again, it's just included in here for information purposes for the users of the statements. Starting on page 11, note 3, we start to get into some of the notes that provide some more detail to numbers on your statement of financial position and operations. So note 3 talks about our cash position, just talks a little bit about the fact that our cash consists of our cash on hand and short-term deposits that are highly liquid with maturities less than 90 days. Note 4 provides the same information that's in Schedule 1, just in a more condensed manner. Note 5 goes through our long-term debt, showing the amounts that are owing, plus the amounts that will be expected to be repaid over the next 5 years. There's also some information here on our debt limits. So the Alberta regulation and the MGA requires that these amounts be disclosed in the financial statements. So we do see that change as we paid off some debt. Note 6 provides information on our equity and capital assets. So when we get into Note 7, we talk about our accumulated surplus. And your accumulated surplus, as I'd mentioned before, is our residual ownership in our assets less our liabilities. And essentially for the commission, your residual asset or residual equity in your assets less your liabilities is really broken into 2 buckets. You've got your amount that's invested in your capital assets. So that's the amount that represents your net book value of your assets less the debt related to it. And then you've got your unrestricted amount. So that is your total amounts that you've earned over the last few years that are available for reinvestment or for operations. Note 8 is our related party transaction note. And of course, this goes through the transactions that we have with the various members. Just because we're considered to be related, the standards require that these amounts be disclosed. So it talks about our sales, our services that we purchase, as well as our receivables and our payables. On page 14, there's a new note this year just with regards to subsequent events. So obviously when we look at the COVID pandemic, there's obviously been quite an impact as we're meeting on Zoom instead of in person, various things like that. So obviously it's introduced a as we call it, a dislocating impact on the economy. How that's going to impact the commission going forward is always a little bit tough to say, but just acknowledge that there's some headwinds for the organization going forward. And then of course note 10, just that the approval of the financial statements, they ultimately need to be approved before I can actually issue my audit opinion. So I think I talked about just about everything on your financial statements and still probably did it in about 15-20 minutes. So I'm not sure if there's any questions or.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Derek on anything related to the financial statements, audited financial statement as he's presented?
Yeah, Merrill and Derek is, a good report, very clear. I don't think there's anything unusual standing out. I was a little concerned about the high water sales, but back in our monthly statements, but obviously the change in model and it'll be interesting to see how that settles out as the year progresses on next year's financials.
Yeah, that was one item that, like I said, I just looked at that and wondered why there was such a change in that first 3 months. Just for my own benefit, Derek, or anybody that's been on the commission longer than me, how many more years is the loan to be paid out? Like, when's the ending date on that loan?
It was a 10-year loan, wasn't it?
10-year loan?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have that answer
No
readily available. I can
problem.
get it for you. I'm not sure if Brian.
Brian
might have the
Badura,
answer
do you know
for it.
the answer to that question?
Just looking at the payment schedule, I don't believe it was a 10-year loan. I think it was a 20 or 25-year loan.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Okay. Okay, anybody else, anything else that stands out to anybody that they'd like questions answered on the financial statements? Sounds like you did a good job getting it all explained, so we need a motion to accept or approve the audited financial statements. So we need somebody to make a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, that was
Alan.
Alan. Okay, thanks, Alan. All in favor? Dave?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Merrill is in favor, so that's carried. Thank you very much, Derek. Now, you need a signature. Okay, just give us a second here, guys. Okay. All right. Next on our agenda is Operations Manager's Report. Ginger.
Hello, how's everybody?
Good. How are you doing, Ginger?
Good, thank you.
So it was been pretty quiet. The biggest thing was the COVID-19 hitting us and, going to a two-person rotation and keeping one operator completely out of the plant, just in case something did happen to one of us. We had backup that we could fly into and, put him into the water plant if needed. And with this, I've also reached out to surrounding communities and we've set up, that we would help each other in case somebody did, or a community did get any illness with this pandemic, that we'd all step in and help each other out. That was the biggest thing that I found in this past little bit. We did a bit of work with our analyzers. They have to be done yearly, so they're all completed. We put 4 new cartridges for filtration system. And I ordered that, had MPE order that flow meter. So it's approximately so. So that's about it right now. Anybody got any questions?
Any questions for Ginger?
I missed-
Oh, go ahead.
I missed the last thing that she said. She cut out there.
Oh, that we ordered that new water meter, that FIT 602. And it's 4 weeks out, approximately.
Okay, thanks, Ginger.
You're welcome.
How long does that take to put in, Ginger?
It won't take long to put in. It takes longer to get the meter here. Probably will only take a day to put in, and that would be commissioned and everything. I won't even think it'll take 8 hours because it's just pull it out and put it in. And then they do their magic with their commissioning and adding it to the SCADA system.
Okay, how's everything working with only one person in the plant, everybody else at home? How's that working?
We're not working that way. We've got to have so many people in the water plant
Okay.
because you've got to transport chemicals and everything. So it's safer to have 2 people there. So right now, what we're doing is we have a 3-day overlap and then 4 days by ourselves.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Ginger on her report? All right, we'll move on then. Report on water treatment plant flows and efficiencies.
So one of the commission members asked me to have a report built, and this is when I called in Dawson that works at the water plant. He has the ability to do his magic with the computer and stuff. So he did up this report, and it's pretty much when it's full build out what flows we're going to see, and what can happen and different things. It's pretty self-explanatory. I find it is, but if anybody else has any questions on it.
Anybody have any questions? Mine, Ginger, it sounded, and I read it again last night, but I don't remember exactly where it was. It sounded like sometimes during the summer, you're close to, and I don't know if this is right, close to running out of water or not being able to keep up. Is that an unfair statement or a fair statement?
So what that is during the day, and there's certain times of day you have your high flows, and your clear well does go down, but they seem to catch up through the night.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like what I have found, even with the Vauxhall water plant, we do the same thing. We lose during the day, but we gain at night. So that's typical. You have your high flows, and of course everybody's waters in the summer when it's hot, they shower more. So you can see your peak times are certain times of the day. And then usually after 11 o'clock, things seem to settle down a little bit more. So that's when you seem to be able to catch up. And I don't know, Dave, do you find that too as well in Burdett?
Yeah, on the hottest days of the year when everybody's watering, it's difficult to keep up. But yeah, it does catch up overnight.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else that sticks out here in this report, Ginger, that we need to be aware of? Are we, like on the last page, page 7 of 7, that was, and I was looking at number 5. That was 2005, fast forward to 2020, and well over half our installed membrane modules are original. Are we looking at a need to upgrade something here soon, or is that the gist of this report, or is it just in?
Well, every year, Merrill, we've been adding 4 new cartridges every year to make sure that we can get to full build out. And once we're there, we're going to have to start replacing the ones that are already in there. But until you're in full build out, it's pretty hard to start replacing them. You just kind of got to repair them and use them as you can. I think Dawson's interpretation was just to let you know if we had to buy all of them at one time, what it would cost.
Okay.
I think that's where he was going with there.
So, Ginger, when we have these peak demand times, that's likely when we'll see pressure issues in the systems, right?
Well, you're going to see a little bit of pressure difference, but you shouldn't see a lot because you have the pumps that can provide the pressure. Because they have six pumps for distribution that can all come on at once if needed.
Right.
You don't want to see that because that's when you have a break usually.
No.
You don't want to see that.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Ginger on the report? Not hearing any. Anything else, Ginger, that you feel you need to let the commission members know about?
Yeah, I just got a text this morning from one of the operators that's working there, and he went and checked out the dome. They've got a problem with kids climbing all over that and hanging off the conduit and that. And there's a little bit of damage, and I think we might have to look at putting a fence around that thing somehow. Because one of these days, those kids, they're either going to fall off of it or they're going to wreck all the electrical conduit that's being run in there. Like, I literally just got this 15 minutes before the meeting started. Pictures.
Okay.
Ginger, I'll get our peace officer to contact the water plant and get some more background and see if he can keep an eye on that. That might help a little bit, but yeah, maybe fencing is ultimately going to be the answer.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Gord.
Okay, yeah. If we can work together to find a solution, if we've got to fence it, we got to fence it. Whatever it takes to make it safe and so it doesn't get wrecked. Okay, again, any other questions for Ginger on this report or on the operations of the water plant?
Yeah, I'd just like to say this report that Dawson did is quite comprehensive. It's really well done, and we appreciate that a lot. That's good information.
Yeah, he does excellent report building, so when it needs to be this, I usually get him to do it, especially for Blue Island, because he knows that plant way better than I do.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will pass that on to Dawson.
Okay. Yeah, again, thank you very
Merrill,
much. Go ahead.
Would you like a motion to accept those reports?
Yes, I guess we should take a motion to accept those reports. Oh, and Candace is asking for 2 separate reports, one for the operations manager report and then one on the report of the water plant flows and efficiencies. So two motions are needed.
Okay, I'll move the managers or the operations manager's report.
Okay, Gordon's given us a motion to accept. All in favor, Dave?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Merrill, yes, carried. A motion for the report on water treatment plant flows and efficiencies.
I can do that. Steve?
Okay, all in favor, Dave?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Jennifer?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Merrill, yes, all carried. Other business, does anybody have anything else that they'd like to bring up today? Anything at all? Brian, Ginger, any members here? Nobody's nodding their heads. No, I can see on the pictures here. All right. Set a date for our next meeting. We've usually been doing it 3 months, haven't we, Candace? Okay. When would be 3 months from now? May, June, July. Is the end of July a good time for everybody, or is that a difficult time?
Well, I'm guessing we're all still going to be at home. Maybe not. But when I'm looking ahead to July, the 24th would probably be best. The 31st would be the long weekend. So if anybody does get away,
Anybody have?
thinking, I don't know.
Okay, does that work for everybody, the 24th of July? I'm looking up at our guys here, Candace, Carlos, that. Okay, so Jennifer's given us a motion, I guess, for a meeting July the 24th. Anybody have any objection to that? I see a few faces in front of me, but nobody's.
That should be good.
All right,
Okay.
well, let's.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so.
Sounds good.
Okay, I'm hearing lots of sounds goods here, so Jennifer's given us a motion for July the 24th at 10 a.m. And whether it's the Zoom still going on or will be in person doesn't really, we'll just deal with it when it comes. So all in favor, Dave?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Gordon?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Merrill is yes. Okay, so July 24th, 10 a.m. All right. Thank you, everybody. We just need one last final motion then.
I'll move it.
Thank you very much. Meeting's adjourned. Have a good day. Have a good summer. Hopefully we can meet in person.
Thanks, Merrill. Thanks, everybody.
You betcha. See you later.
See you, everybody.
Have a good day.